Welcome to the show, everyone. It's the Crypto Lark. Today, I'm sitting down with Giuseppe from Bitcoin Private. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Lark. Appreciate it.
Now, you guys have been getting a lot of press recently, but for anybody who hasn't heard about you, what are you guys doing? Give us the short version.
Sure. So Bitcoin Private is a fork merge of the Z Classic and Bitcoin blockchains. So we forked Z Classic and we merged it with the UTXO set of Bitcoin. Our mission is to bring mathematically provable privacy technology to a mainstream level across the world. There's a lot of great privacy technologies out there. Some are mathematically proven, such as ZK-snarks. Some are not. They're all pretty great, but we believe ZK-snarks is the best one out there. However, there's the issue that I think anyone can say that it has not yet reached mainstream adoption, and we think that's a pretty big problem, especially with the Bitcoin network, which is the most used protocol, obviously, for peer-to-peer electronic cash transactions, is becoming more and more de-anonymized, and that trend will probably continue. And we think it's important to bring this technology to a more mainstream level through methods of creating super user-friendly products, and of course through increased innovation on the blockchain itself.
Nice. I think the first question outside of the elevator pitch is, why use the Bitcoin name? Why not go with Z Classic Private, for example? What I know, because there's some people out there that look at any of the forks and go, oh, they're trying to hop on the bandwagon. So what was the rationale behind calling it Bitcoin Private, or even from forking the Bitcoin code, not just sticking with the Z Classic code?
Sure. Actually, the two great questions within that. So we believe that the Bitcoin community is by far the most vibrant one out there. It is the only cryptocurrency that has proven mass scale relative to any other cryptocurrency. I don't think anyone can argue that. And we believe, if we want privacy technology, or the one that we deem to be the best out there, to come to a mainstream audience, then we believe bringing in or coming to the largest community out there is going to be a part of that strategy and equation. With respects to the base technology, we currently are based on the Zcash's code, right? But we actually just announced today that we are going to be rebasing to be on Bitcoin. So we'll be able, through this refactoring, we will be gaining about 1.5 years worth of Bitcoin upgrades that other ZK protocol-based coins today do not have.
So we're going to see SegWit integration.
Yes, you will. Yes, and that's I believe Q3, Q4 this year, approximately.
Lightning Network.
That is also in there as well. Yes.
So what you're telling me is
in the roadmap, I should say.
In the roadmap. So what we might be seeing is a Lightning Network-enabled ZK-snark Bitcoin, essentially.
Yeah. That's accurate to say, yes, because we believe also part of it too. There's the transparent and shielded transactions. Obviously, the shielded ones are going to continue to be the same, and we can get into some of the upgrades that are slated to come later this year. But on the transparent side, it is going to be important to continue to make those as private and anonymous as possible, and that's part of our core mission. So that's part of it why. Mm-hmm. Although I would say Lightning's more of a scaling solution, obviously.
Now, ZK-snarks obviously has got one of the best names of any privacy solution, but outside of that, why not ring signatures? ZK-snarks are getting to be talked about more and more. Like what the guys over at ZeroCoin are using is a different methodology yet again. What was so convincing for you guys about ZK-snarks over all the other options?
Sure. So those are all great solutions, I think. I think there are many other great solutions as well, but the reason why we believe ZK-snarks is the best one out there, and that's the one we went with at the time, is because the level of research, backing, and also just proven usability and that is involved in that was the biggest reason why. And then also too, there's the notion of it may not be fast today, but there are obviously upgrades in kind of scheduled with the new sapling release later this year. That will make these types of transactions, shielded transactions, much faster and more efficient.
That's
more usable.
You beat me to my next question. Aren't ZK-snarks slow? And this is part of the problem of them. But with the upgrade coming, that's I think going to be a really important aspect for that technology moving forward. A follow-up question on that, though, normally what we see is that when you can send your transaction using the non-shielded transaction, that will have a lower transaction cost than doing a shielded transaction. Is that going to be the same with Bitcoin Private? Will it cost more to send a shielded transaction?
So it will, as of now it is, yes. But we believe that there will be ways to bring that down. So to make it more parity and at par.
Okay.
And then of course that's part of it, because part of it too is we will be making shielded transactions default in nature. The reason why they're not default today is because, for example, it's just not possible to send, or it's possible, but it's really not practical to send a shielded transaction on a mobile device, for example, right? It would just take far too long. And part of our mission is if we want to create super user-friendly products, mobile is going to be a piece of that equation. And then if privacy is our core concept, then we want to make sure that's part of the equation. So it'll be very important, when it's possible and the processing times for shielded transactions are lowered due to the upgrade coming out later this year, then we'll be able to kind of implement them on mobile first, make them default, etc.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the privacy as the default option would be really powerful. And of course, if you can get that transaction fee and transaction fee down and speed up.
Yep.
It's going to be really awesome. That's
really awesome. For sure.
Now, you guys have gone with Equihash and not the SHA-256. What's the rationale behind that?
Mainly from a decentralized standpoint. We think Equihash stands for more decentralization, number one. It's extremely ASIC resistant, especially due to the high memory requirements. So that was mainly the reason why. We want to make sure, we are a decentralized community first, especially in just the way we make decisions, in the way we build technology, the way we bring great ideas together, and we want to make sure that is clear in everything that we kind of implement, right? So that was the main catalyst for that decision.
I know recently the teams over at, for example, Vertcoin and Monero have done upgrades in order to combat the Bitmain ASICs that have been designed to, come in and disrupt what they're doing. Would you guys consider similar situations where if Bitmain were to develop an ASIC miner, would you change in order to avoid that happening?
Definitely, like everything we'd give consideration to. We'd probably discuss it amongst the team. It'll be interesting when and if that happens, but I don't have too much of a comment on that right now. But it's definitely going to be fascinating to see how it plays out, and definitely something that we're going to have to keep in mind, of course.
Yeah, it's Bitmain. They'll do it. It's just a question.
I know. Yeah.
If they can sell a miner, they're gonna.
That's a good point. Yeah. No.
Now, speaking of miners, most of the Bitcoin private coins have already been mined, because what you guys did a snapshot of the Bitcoin blockchain, a snapshot of Z Classic, and basically you're at about, what, 20.5 million at the moment, is it, or something about that?
Yeah, right about there. Yeah.
So that means there's only 500,000 left to mine. How do you actually incentivize miners to come over and mine Bitcoin private when there's so little reward left?
Sure. So, I think the question, how we continue to build cool technology that is useful and will show scale and will show adoption through many of the programs that we have running as a community. I think number one, and so far it's proven to work. Number two, continue to keep a good relationship with miners. I think that's one thing we pride ourselves on, both at the time of pre-fork, fork, and now post-fork, is maintaining a healthy relationship, a healthy line of communication with mining pools that we've welcomed into our community and the greater miner community. And I think that's going to continue to be a part of that, the solution to what you just said, the risk you just mentioned. And then obviously, we are going to have to address this, right? Because the cap is 21 million in our eyes, as outlined in the white paper. And one way of addressing that will come, one potential way of addressing that, is to claim kind of the unmoved coins, or a percentage of unmoved coins, back to and give them back to the miners. And I think that's actually the way we like to think about it is that's actually a pretty neat way to think about governance, right? In the sense of kind of how maintaining that relationship with miners, where, you know, we see it as a way we will incentivize miners in the future by increasing the block reward as a result of kind of claiming back these unmoved coins in the event we do that, which would can't happen until at least 1 year, you know, just because of what we said in the white paper. But kind of having that down the line as well is going to help us, because if there's maybe something that we need to implement at the kind of the blockchain level that require an upgrade, well, then we would coincide it with this increased incentive to miners, right? And assuming, of course, that we're maintaining integrity in the ecosystem and that we're continuing to do our part as a development community, it's a pretty cool way to keep everything aligned, right? But to answer your question most directly, the way we're incentivizing today is by continuing to do our part and follow through with what we said we would do in building cool technology that's useful. And then, of course, down the line, we have one solution potentially that would help with that.
You know, when I was thinking about this, when I was writing out the questions, I was thinking, oh, poor Satoshi Nakamoto, because you know he's not going to move those coins for, you know, another 30 years until he takes over the world by releasing his 1 million Bitcoin. He'll miss out on the Bitcoin private.
Right. I mean, right. Yeah. I mean, and then there are also, too, I think there's many other that are known, or at least are rumored to be lost, right?
Yeah.
Allegedly be lost. I mean, I don't think anyone can say for 100% certainty, but I think, yeah.
Yeah, like that guy in Wales who threw away his laptop with, you know, thousands of Bitcoin on it. You know, that will be a prime candidate, because those will never be claimed, because they can't be claimed because the private keys are gone. And so those are the the Bitcoin private that will be cycled back into the system later. So
Right.
Now, you guys are starting off with 2 megabyte block sizes. I saw that Bitcoin Cash is going up to like 32 megabyte block sizes now, because I guess they need something to do to keep relevant. But, you know, I mean, what's your plan? I mean, are you already thinking, okay, how can we make bigger block sizes in the future?
No, we're not. We actually, we haven't given that, I don't think, 1 millisecond of thought. I think that Bitcoin developers are thinking through scaling solutions, right? They've been ahead of the curve. They're going to continue to be ahead of the curve. It's a question of time. And as a technologist and people who have built technology, you're never going to have the solution on day one, right? It's a question of making sure that you build towards that solution. And there's plenty of different scaling solutions in play that have already been created and tested, actually, not even in play. And I think that 2 megabytes is fine. We're not going to, and I think, once again, we believe our competitive advantage is the privacy side, right? And we're not trying to become the most, although we find ourselves to be quite scalable, you know, we're not trying to compete on that. And we don't think that that's where the end user is going to experience max value, right? So it's not necessary. I think Bitcoin is handling these scaling problems quite fine, and we have no reason to believe they're not going to be handling these quite fine in the future.
That's it. They've been doing okay so far, anyway. Now,
very well.
what about the people behind Bitcoin Private? I mean, we've got you here, but who else is behind it? What's been the, you know, developer community response to it been, and how many people are actually involved in, you know, trying to push this project forward as, like, you know, their full-time jobs, so to speak?
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's quite a few people. I don't have an exact number off the top of my head today. I want to say we're around the 70-ish range, over 70 contributors. Wow. On the engineering side, we have over 20. And I've had the fortune to meet some of these people in person, whether it be at one of the conferences that were held in New York City. We also had a meetup in San Francisco. And, you know, from my background, I'm a software professional. I've been very fortunate to work with some great engineers in the past and other software technologists. And some of the engineers that are working on this are quite, they're very impressive. And I've been able to learn so much from them. And then, you know, and also just how cohesive we're becoming in terms of a team. You know, most of us came together in you know, after the fork merge was announced. We came together in January, most of us, and we are continuing to work together, and it's working out quite well. But I would say, you know, it's one of the most cohesive development teams that I've had the privilege of working with. And then of course on the, we have a lot of community members that also contribute on more of the marketing side, etc. Those are type of efforts that come about. Our focus is technology first and building the kind of best technology products out there, and both on the blockchain side, but also on the consumer facing side.
Nice. Very cool. What about governance? How are you going to govern this whole thing? And how are you going to keep, I guess, funds coming in to keep people funded within that community moving forward? I know you guys have had sort of a limited, I guess we can call it a pre-mine, but a lot of people haven't called it a pre-mine. You guys think of it a little bit differently. You can explain that a bit, but what happens when that runs out? Why didn't you go for a Dash style model where, you get a certain percentage of the block reward, for example?
Sure. So, well, the reason why we didn't want a percentage of the block reward is because we want to stay true to a decentralized model. We don't want, participants on the mining side, we don't want them to feel that, they will be taxed if they want to participate in our blockchain, right? We don't feel that that is appropriate for what we're trying to build, at least. I think for some currencies, or cryptocurrencies, excuse me, it's appropriate. For others like ours, it's not, so I think that is more of a simple response to that. And in terms of, we've received many donations to date in connection with the fork merge. We were very fortunate with the voluntary miner contribution program for miners to believe in the project and want to participate in the blockchain and donate their hash power that way. And then, of course, to your point, though, those particular donations are finite in nature, right? One day they have to run up, mathematically speaking. So, in terms of how we look at making sure that we have a healthy stream of donations coming in, moving forward, for example, we're building a merchant vendor solution, or the community is at least, and then that may be the beginning of a longer term effort and initiative to build cool vendor tools that may kind of pull in a revenue stream that way. We've also had some other developers, or I should say kind of third-party developers, come to us with ideas and projects that they want to run as for-profit type initiatives, but premised on the Bitcoin private blockchain. And then, of course, they would donate a percentage of their profits in perpetuity to the community development team. So, we're investigating, and we're constantly and actively working with these third-party developers and seeing, kind of what kind of an ecosystem they want to build with us. For example, if you look at, it's totally different, but Ethereum, for example, and Consensus, right? How Ethereum is, they're focused on the blockchain, but then there's this whole other arm that is private called Consensus that will work on various projects that help fuel that ecosystem and keep it running. So that's kind of, once again, it's different, but parallel to kind of how I'm trying to explain this, if that makes sense. But by no means do we have everything figured out right now, right? I think any team that says they have everything figured out should be very wary of. There's a lot that we need to figure out, right? It's just like, any startup, for example, right? I think that we're, cryptocurrency in general, the field itself is a startup, with the exception of Bitcoin, and nothing's really been around that long. So there's a lot that we're still figuring out, but I think continuing to listen to the community members, get feedback, and continue to build towards different solutions that we think will gain user adoption and real world adoption that we've already demonstrated in some ways, is going to be a key to that solution. The rest is, making sure that we keep our head on the ball, focused, and continue to execute.
Nice. Now, Ledger wallet support. You guys have got this done in kind of like record time. It makes me wonder why some other cryptocurrencies, it takes them, I don't know, forever to get this done. But why did it happen so quickly? And I guess what are the challenges that make it take so long for some of the other projects to ever get what Ledger support?
Sure. So I can't comment on why other projects have issues. I mean, I think a key component of it, for sure, was the community. I think the community, for sure, definitely has been pressing, Ledger for the longest time, because they love Ledger's product, they enjoy the experience, but they're also participants in the Bitcoin private blockchain, and they want to be able to safely store their Bitcoin private. So it makes sense, right? I personally have a Ledger, and I love using it. So I would also like that,
Yeah.
And then in terms of, how that process has been. So I wasn't interfacing directly with their team, and a couple of our other team members, our lead wallet developer, for example, was the main contact there, and he's only had wonderful things to say. I think that, of course, whether the Ledger team loves Bitcoin private or whether it was the community that pushed them, or a combination of the two, I'm not sure. I don't know. But the challenges mainly were just making sure that we, the code implementation that we would put up there worked and was sound. And of course, our lead wallet developer was able to do that quite soundly, obviously. So I think that was a key component of it as well. I think that the Ledger team saw that the code was written quite well, and that combined with the community knocking on their door constantly, they're like, okay, this is a real project, it's a real team, and it would be a great addition to our wonderful technology. So
nice. Currently, you're only listed on a couple of small exchanges. And I know you can't say, okay, we're going to be listed on Binance tomorrow, but are those negotiations happening for larger exchanges? When can the Bitcoin private community expect more liquidity for their coins?
Sure. So, we've previously announced that HitBTC, which is a pretty large exchange, will be listing Bitcoin private. There have been delays with that, of course. We are in constant communication with their team, though, and they will be listing Bitcoin private. So, that will bring a lot of liquidity and accessibility to current participants of Bitcoin private, and also future prospective participants in the Bitcoin private blockchain. With regard to other larger exchanges, those are definitely our main focus. There's a lot of emerging smaller ones that we welcome, of course, but we've been focusing the majority of our time, of course, when in the exchange initiative on these larger ones. And in terms of, it's a fair question to ask, right? I think for anyone, why is it only listed on a few exchanges right now, and why isn't it listed on any of the larger ones? And there's many reasons for why that can be. We can all speculate. I mean, I think one reason, for example, there were a couple of many other Bitcoin forks, right, prior to Bitcoin private. And if you look at the development activity of those, unfortunately, there's little to none. If you look at the innovation that those forks brought, little to none. So I think that it is clear that there may be some skepticism around Bitcoin forks today, right? So I think that some of these exchanges may be looking at our ongoing efforts to see that we're a real team, as we are, that we have real developments coming out, which we have been. I think we just issued our 6th community update since the mainnet launch, which talked about the rebase, and I think that's huge. And they want to make sure that we're a real community. And in some ways, you really can't blame them for taking those stances, right? I think that cryptocurrency in general as a space, it has to mature, it has to evolve. And if we don't, as a community, as a whole, this is not even just to do with Bitcoin private, but as a whole, if we don't start holding operators and developers and these projects to higher standards, how are we going to evolve as a whole, right? So, I would say, I kind of went on a tangent on that, but it's because I also am a bit passionate about it. It's just reality. So I would say that's one component of it. And the other component is just time, right? It takes time. The mainnet launched on March 2nd. It hasn't even been 60 days. So, it takes time to develop these relationships, foster them, and show that, we have a lot of good stuff in the works. But I think, frustrations in some ways can be understood, but at the same time, if you really step back and think about it, it's natural, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. It's the big exchanges are usually fairly hesitant, and it takes a while. There's an application process you have to go through and all these different things. Speaking of exchanges, now I've got a subscriber question here for you from Crypto Ninja. He wants to know what happens to his Bitcoin that was on Binance exchange in particular, but maybe you could answer that in a wider sense about other exchanges. So if you had your Bitcoin on an exchange at that time, will you get your Bitcoin private in the end? And why didn't any of these, some of the larger exchanges anyway, support the fork?
Sure. So from what I've come to understand, supporting a Bitcoin fork involves a lot of overhead. So you have to shut down the Bitcoin wallets, etc. And to look at the size of some of these exchanges, especially to how quickly they've grown, you know, they have their own reasons for why they may have not supported it at the outset. I don't have an answer to that, unfortunately. If I did, I would love to give you one, but I don't. But with regard to what happens in that particular instance you just gave, you know, I have one Bitcoin on, for example, Binance. Will I ever get my Bitcoin private? I also don't have an answer to that in complete honesty. Will Binance ever be able to credit that to that user? I also, you know, that's their decision. I'm not able to speak for them. And I think that for community members, more than welcome to ask questions to their local exchange for that, right? But but that's the best possible answer I can give.
And I think that just, of course, points to the importance of don't keep your money on exchanges, guys. Be in charge of your private keys. So important.
That's very important.
Now, you guys have community research grants. Has anyone applied for one of those yet? And I guess what's the intention behind having the research grants? Sure.
So we have, excuse me, received a few applications to date. The intention, and I'm not at liberty to discuss the contents of them, of course, for confidentiality purposes to date. But the purpose of them is to welcome, you know, cryptographers out there who believe in privacy and believe in peer-to-peer electronic cash transactions to exist on the blockchain, to come and help innovate, right? You know, we recognize the fact that, you know, we want to grow our development team. You know, the current community development members aren't going to figure everything out. And we want to make sure that we can, you know, mutually align with some of these researchers out there who may be, you know, that are studying cryptography, are interested in the problem that we're solving. And I think that it's a mutually benefiting relationship that can be struck. And, you know, there's something to be said about people who are technical, very ambitious, and have those skill sets, a very rare skill set to have. So it's an opportunity to, you know, build towards our eventual mission of bringing the best possible privacy technology to a mainstream audience. And that's one clear initiative and approach that we just have to have in place if we want to have that come true. You know, it just maximizes the likelihood of that. And at the same time, it does good for the industry. You know, I've caught up with a friend of mine who is a researcher, not in cryptography, but in distributed systems and virtual currencies. And, you know, he actually said that there's very few researchers who, out of an entire cohort of a class, that are actually interested in the blockchain. And, you know, there's actually, people think that there's you would think it's kind of surprising, but at the same time, you know, they have their hands full, right? And I think that it is, you know, for projects that are able to, we need to foster more interest. If it's not for Bitcoin private, it's for another project. Let's get them in this industry. It's only going to help everyone else out in the long run. So it's, I think from a macro standpoint for the industry as a whole, you know, we're proud to be able to play a part in getting that in. It's not just about, of course, it's going to benefit Bitcoin private, obviously. That's the number one reason why we're doing it. But, you know, a collateral reason for why we're doing it that some can argue is equally as important, if not more important, is we're helping out the industry as a whole. There's a lot of bright minds out there that have yet to even think about, you know, experimenting with blockchain technology, and we need more of those people.
Win-win, right? When you support the community, they support you, and it creates a virtuous cycle. And I see that so much in the blockchain community in particular. The people want to do business in a different way. People want to start this virtuous cycle where everybody can win. You know, you can help educate people, you can help bring people in, you can give them research grants, they're going to support you later. It's a great thing. Now, final question for you. Merchant adoption. How are you going to get this across to merchants? How are you going to get, you know, a merchant to use Bitcoin private over just Bitcoin in their shops? That in itself has been a struggle. How do you sell it?
Very exciting question. I'm very glad that you asked something about this. So we've actually, as outlined in a couple of our community updates, We've actually been working on a merchant platform. It's a phase 4 product as of now, and obviously that's subject to change as we gather user feedback, etc. The reason why, so we initially only wanted to start developing, not only, but we initially wanted to start developing these types of merchant tools closer to the summer, but there were actually merchants that were coming to us asking how they can start accepting Bitcoin private for their online businesses or in-store businesses, and B, some of them started accepting it without us.
Oh, interesting.
Literally. There's actually a couple of tweets, and you can find them on Twitter. I'm more than happy to send them to you. For example, a hotel owner that accepted Bitcoin private in the US for someone's hotel stay, which was super cool to see. And there was a jewelry store in Europe somewhere that was accepting it already. And then, of course, we started accepting pre-signups for the merchant platform the community is building. And we already have over 50 pre-signups of merchants wanting to accept Bitcoin private. So, I mean, the reason why, the way we're going to tackle it, to answer part of your question, is we're going to develop user-friendly products. I think from my background, which is in consumer technology, I can safely say there's a fundamental lack of consumer product building expertise in the crypto space in general. That's fine, right? I mean, the most important stuff is the protocol layer technology. But if we are to believe that part of the kind of end game is for widespread adoption, at some point, whether sooner or later, we will have to think about user-friendly design and products and implementation. And that's where a big forte of our team comes in. And we've been building out user-friendly products that we believe will kind of show merchants that it's really easy to accept cryptocurrency, ours being a private cryptocurrency, which as a business owner, is probably what you want to accept. And, you know, we're continuing to build on these tools, and then at the same time, welcoming third-party developers in the ecosystem to build more and more of these tools out. We'll kind of create a network effect of sorts. So that'll be part of the solution, just like any consumer product. In terms of why would a merchant want to accept Bitcoin private versus any other cryptocurrency, I think there's a couple of reasons. A, it's pretty fast, and B, the privacy technology behind it. I think that it's important as a business owner to maintain the integrity of your financial data. There are entities out there, and there's going to be even more out there. You can go ahead and hire and pay them a lot of money and say, hey, my competitor across the street, they've been accepting this coin for a while. Can you tell me about their information? Maybe I want to find out how much revenue they're generating. And that's obviously unfortunate, but it's happening, and it's going to continue to happen. So as a business owner, why would you want to risk that? There should be no reason to risk that. So that's where Bitcoin private comes in. We're one of these solutions that can defend against that. And of course, there are other solutions that, you know, whether today or in the future, that can also offer some form of privacy technology. We're not saying we're the only ones. However, if you take that part of the equation and combine it with these user-friendly products that we're going to be putting out there, we're going to be actually launching a beta with an early pool of our pre-signups on the merchant side over the next 2 weeks. If you kind of combine it with that and continued iteration on that, because one of the golden rules to building a successful consumer product is it requires iteration. No one successful consumer product out there, whether it be in fintech, social media, etc., ever made it on version 1. It's probably going to be version, I don't know, 2000, right?
That's true.
But if you combine both of those elements, and of course everything else, right, that I'm not mentioning, you have a recipe for why merchants are going to want to take Bitcoin private over most, if not all, other coins.
Interesting. Interesting. I know we're certainly going to be watching with anticipation, seeing how Bitcoin private develops. I mean, the upgrades that you guys have coming, I think, are going to be very exciting when you can, of course, you know, make the transactions faster and default privacy and all this stuff. I think that's only going to bring more merchants to the platform and more interest in to what you guys are doing. So very interesting times indeed. Giuseppe, thanks for sitting down and going over Bitcoin private with us and telling us what you guys are doing.
Thank you so much, Lark. It's been a pleasure. Really appreciate the time speaking.
Thank you.
Take care.